The slap cracked across my face like a gunshot. It wasn't just the sting of my father's hand against my cheek. It was the heat in my daughter's eyes, the way her small fingers gripped the edge of the table, the way her body froze, halfway between curiosity and fear. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stood there, one palm pressed against my cheek, blood surging behind my eyes like a rising tide. My name is Erica Monroe, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because have you ever stood in the middle of your own family, bleeding, and realized you were never one of them to begin with? The night began like any other toxic evening, masked as a family tradition. A long oak table, steaming dishes, my sister Casey glowing in her usual spotlight, fake lashes, fake gratitude, real manipulation. She twirled her fork in her quinoa salad, dropped her voice sweetly, and said, "Rent's due again. It's been tough this month. Right, Mom?" And that's when the performance began. Mom dabbed her napkin like she was in some soap opera and turned to me. "You make more than enough," she said. Then louder, for effect, "Help your sister, or leave this house." I had heard enough. No. The word felt clean, like air after a storm. Dad put down his fork with a clink. Everyone looked up. I didn't flinch. I'm not paying her rent again. She hasn't had a job in 2 years. She parties all weekend and posts about manifesting abundance, while draining everyone around her. I'm done. For a second, no one moved. Even Casey blinked. Then Dad stood up, walked around the table, and slapped me, just like that. No warning. No hesitation. No shame. My daughter, Ava, gasped so loud it hurt more than the blow. I stumbled back, catching myself on the edge of the buffet cabinet. A glass clinked to the floor. My cheek throbbed, but I barely noticed. Because that's when he laughed. A short, smug burst of cruelty that echoed off the dining room walls. "We've been waiting for this moment," he said. "Someone needed to put you in your place." Mom gave a small nod, like she agreed. My sister. She just sipped her wine. Ava's eyes darted between all of them, then locked on me. Her lip trembled. She didn't understand everything, but she saw enough. And that was it. That was the moment everything turned. They thought they'd broken me. What they didn't realize is that they'd just handed me the match to burn it all down. I stood up straighter, wiped my face, then turned to Ava and said, quietly, "Go get your coat." That was the last time my family ever saw me as the girl they thought they could control. And it was the last peaceful night they'd ever have. Because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to dismantle everything they built, quietly, methodically, and in full view of the world. Let the games begin. I didn't speak as I walked out the front door, Ava's tiny hand clutched in mine. She kept looking up at me, confused, like she didn't know if she was supposed to be scared or strong. I squeezed her hand tighter. That was the last dinner I ever attended at that house, and from that moment on, I stopped calling it home. The next morning, I woke up in a cheap motel. Floral curtains, buzzing light overhead. One queen bed for both of us. But for the first time in years, I felt free. I opened my laptop, logged into the shared family bank account my father once made me co-sign, back when I was the responsible one. I had access, and he had no idea I still remembered the credentials. That's when I saw it. $37,200 transferred from my account over the last 2 years to cases. Rent, credit card bills, even hair appointments labeled as health expenses. My entire tax refund from last year, gone. I took screenshots. Every transaction. Every note. I saved it all into a folder titled "For the Day They Pretend I Made This Up." Then I moved the rest of the money, what little was left, into a new private account under Ava's name. That was just step one. I got us breakfast at a small diner off the highway. Ava stirred her orange juice with a straw. "Why did Grandpa hit you?" she asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Because he's angry," I said no. She stared at me for a while, then whispered, I would have said no too. That's when I knew she was watching. Everything I did from now on would shape the kind of woman she'd become. So I started planning my revenge, not out of hate, but out of justice. They had taken my silence as weakness. They'd used guilt as a leash, money as a weapon, and blood as a boundary. But now I was free. I contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, that old friend, Paul, who always bragged about being neutral. I sent him the screenshots, the details of the slap, the emotional abuse over the years. He didn't reply right away, but when he did, it was just one line. This is more than enough. Next, I printed the receipts from all the fake loans I gave Casey. I had texts from Mom demanding I do the right thing. I pieced together a timeline. I created a file so thick it felt like a biography of betrayal. Then I got an alert. Ava's school tuition, paid 3 months ahead, had just been reversed. Why? Because my parents had listed themselves as guarantors and revoked the payment after the dinner. They were punishing my daughter to hurt me. I stayed at the screen for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and dialed someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my mother's sister, Aunt Rachel. We hadn't spoken since I was 21. She answered on the third ring, cautious. Erica. I need your help, I said. And when I told her what happened, she whispered, they finally did it, didn't they? We met that afternoon. Turns out, I wasn't the only one they'd tried to destroy. Rachel had been written out of the family for marrying someone Dad didn't like. She lost everything, her inheritance, her position in the family business, her dignity. But she still had something, connections, and she wanted justice too. Together, we made a plan. It started with a quiet knock, a process server, an envelope, a lawsuit, and the first domino fell. They thought their dinner slap was the last word. They didn't realize it was only my first move. The papers were served on a Thursday morning. My father, a man who once mocked people who cried legal, stood frozen at the front door with the manila envelope in his hand. According to Aunt Rachel's contact, the process server, he didn't even blink. Just stared, like the letter might catch fire in his grip. Casey was home too. She screamed, apparently, loud enough that neighbors peeked through blinds. She always liked being the loudest in the room, until the room turned on her. Inside those documents were accusations. Not just emotional abuse, but financial manipulation, theft by coercion, and slander. Everything backed by screenshots, messages, and statements from people they never expected to talk. See, I'd started calling more than just Aunt Rachel. I reached out to old family friends, former employees from my parents' real estate company, even a few of Casey's exes, the ones who'd left suddenly, quiet, ashamed. Turns out she had a history. They all did, and I wasn't the first casualty. I was just the first one who fought back. The school principal called me the next day. He'd heard about the tuition being pulled, and when I explained why, something shifted. We'll cover the next 3 months, he said quietly. You focus on the legal side. Ava deserves to stay. I cried after hanging up, not because of weakness, but because kindness, when you're used to cruelty, feels like shock. Meanwhile, my father sent his first message. Let's talk. This has gone far enough. I didn't reply. Then came the second. You're making a fool of yourself. There's still time to make it right. Still silence. On the third day, he texted Ava. Hope you're okay, sweetie. Grandpa misses you. That's when I blocked him on her phone too. They wanted to play dirty. I knew how to get clean and still win. With Rachel's help, we filed a financial inquiry into my name being attached to business accounts I never authorized. Turned out my parents had listed me as a silent partner on properties I never saw, just to qualify for better loan rates. It was fraud. My name was being used. My credit was leveraged. My signature was forged. And now it was all being exposed. I kept going. I created a video, not for social media, but for Ava, a record of everything. What they'd done. What I'd endured. and why I finally said enough. In that video, I looked into the camera and said, if you're ever made to feel small for saying no, remember this: your silence is not peace. It's permission. And I refused to give them mine. Then came the court date. I showed up in a plain navy dress. Ava wore a little yellow cardigan. We walked past my father, my mother, and Casey, all seated on the bench like nothing was wrong. Their lawyer looked smug, until mine handed over the stack. Emails, bank records, the forged documents, a letter from Ava's principal, even screenshots of Casey bragging in group chats about bleeding her idiot sister dry. The judge read in silence. Then he looked up and said, "You'll need to answer for every single line." That's when my father's face finally cracked. A flicker of something I hadn't seen in years. Not anger, not pride, fear. I walked out of that courtroom with my daughter beside me, the weight a little lighter. But it wasn't over yet, because while justice was being served in court, I had one more thing planned. A speech. At the one event they thought I wouldn't dare show up to. Their charity gala, where reputations were gold and truth was poison. Let them sip champagne now. I was about to pour the truth down their throats. The night of the gala arrived draped in glitz, glass, and artificial grace. My parents hosted it every year at the Grandfield Estate Ballroom, an evening meant to show off their supposed generosity, raise funds for causes they barely cared about, and remind everyone in town of their pristine reputation. But this time, I wasn't coming as the obedient daughter in the shadows. I was the storm they never saw forming. Rachel helped me secure a spot on the guest list. Technically, I was still listed as a partner in the real estate company, thanks to the fraudulent documents, and that gave me access. I showed up in a sleek black jumpsuit, simple, striking, and sharp as truth. Ava stayed with Rachel. Tonight wasn't for her to witness. It was for me, and every woman who's ever been silenced with a fake smile. As I stepped through the grand doors, I could feel the weight of stares. Some familiar, some curious, others cold. And then, I saw them. Dad, standing near the stage in a tailored tux, talking to city officials like nothing had happened. Mom, in emerald green, sipping wine like it was her throne. Casey, floating around in silver, laughing like she hadn't gutted me a month ago. I made my way to the coordinator, a kind young woman named Elise, who liked events and believed in real stories. "You sure about this?" she asked me. I nodded. "Every lie has a season. This one's ending tonight." She handed me the MIC schedule. They had me listed after the mayor's thank you speech. Perfect. The minutes ticked by. Every clink of glass, every empty compliment exchanged in that hall added fuel to the fire inside me. And then, we now invite one of our own, a daughter of this legacy, to say a few words. Applause rose. They expected me to say something glowing, polished, controlled. I stepped onto the stage, took a breath. My name is Savannah Green, and I'm here to tell the truth. A hush fell. I saw Dad's jaw tighten. Mom lowered her glass slowly. Casey's fake smile froze like glass. I used to think family meant protection, but when I needed help, they gave me humiliation. When I stood up for myself, I was slapped to the floor in front of my daughter. When I said no, they called me selfish, but what they really meant was silent. I paused. You've all donated tonight to causes you care about, but do you know who you're giving to? The same people who used their daughter's name to commit financial fraud, who forged her signature to secure business loans, who mocked her pain and gaslighted her dignity. Gasps echoed. People looked at one another, at them. My silence bought them peace. Tonight, I'm repossessing it. The event coordinator didn't stop me. The mayor looked stunned. One of the trustees actually stood and applauded. And then I finished. I don't want your sympathy. I want you to know this. When someone shows you their smile, ask what it cost. Because sometimes, behind the pearls and polished speeches, there's a daughter in blooded silence. Not anymore. I walked off stage. The ballroom had fractured into whispers and sideways glances. Reporters followed me out. One asked, "Do you plan to press further charges?" I turned, smiled softly, and said, "I already did. Tonight." By morning, the video was everywhere. Someone had recorded it. It hit social media before I even got home. #daughter unmasked. #green family scandal. I didn't post it, but truth has a way of surfacing when you stop hiding. By noon, the real estate firm's social media pages were flooded. Sponsors pulled out of the charity board. Casey lost a modeling campaign she'd just signed. But I wasn't done yet, because there was one final move to make. Something personal, something permanent, and I had just the right moment planned. The day they'd least expect it. Ava's parent-teacher conference. Because even in destruction, I believed in planting new seeds. The parent-teacher conference was set for Friday afternoon, a quiet, seemingly normal day, with no storm on the horizon. Ava had been doing better lately. More smiles, fewer night terrors. Her teacher, Mrs. Langley, had sent a glowing email about her progress. But what I was about to do wasn't just for Ava's record. It was for her future and mine. I invited my parents to the conference, saying it was important that we all show support for Ava's education. They agreed quickly, likely hoping to polish their reputation with one more photo in a school newsletter. The same parents who had laughed when I bled now wanted to sit beside me like nothing had happened. This time, I'd give them a seat, but not the one they expected. Before the meeting, I met with the school's principal. I'd shown her the evidence, the police report, the gala video, and the forged business papers. She agreed to allow a recording, given the nature of my request. Mrs. Langley welcomed us in. I sat on one side with Ava. My parents sat across from us, unbothered, dressed in pretentious calm. My dad offered a fake grin. My mom crossed her legs elegantly, as if this were afternoon tea. "Ava is bright," Mrs. Langley said warmly, "but I've noticed she becomes withdrawn when Satan family topics arise." I nodded. She's seen a lot she shouldn't have. I turned to my parents. "Would you like to hear what she told me last night?" They looked confused, unsure where this was going. She said, "I'm scared of Grandpa's laugh. It sounds like when Mommy cried." The color drained from my father's face. Mom stiffened. I stood up and gently placed a folder on the desk. Inside are the documents showing how you used my name to sign fraudulent loans. The police are aware. So is the IRS. Then I pulled out a copy of the restraining order. Effective immediately, you're to stay 500 feet away from me and Ava. My mom scoffed. "You can't be serious." The principal cleared her throat. "It's been verified. We're also informing staff and security. If they approach campus again, they'll be trespassing." Dad stood. "You're doing this in front of her." I nodded slowly. "She deserves to see what boundaries look like. You should have taught me that, but now I'll teach her." The air was heavy, and Ava looked up at me with those wide, brave eyes. She didn't fully understand everything, but she saw enough. She saw me choose her over fear. "I lost everything once trying to protect this family," I said, my voice steady. "I won't lose her too. My parents tried one last tactic, guilt. We raised you," my mom hissed. "We gave you everything." "You gave me silence," I replied. "And tonight, I give it back to you." They stormed out of the room, red-faced, powerless. No dramatic exit, no applause, just the quiet sound of consequences catching up. Ava squeezed my hand as we left the school. "Mommy," she whispered, "are they gone forever?" I crouched beside her. "They're gone from our world, baby. And this time, I'm not letting them back in." That evening, I received a voicemail from my dad, slurred apologies, half blame, half pity. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a savings account under Ava's name. A fresh start. No lies. No strings. That night, as Ava fell asleep clutching her stuffed penguin, I looked around our modest apartment and felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. But I knew the battle wasn't fully over. Not yet. Because someone else had been watching quietly from the sidelines. Casey. And I could feel her next move brewing. Little did she know, I had one more card to play. One that would make the world finally see her for what she really was. Because some masks take longer to fall. But when they do, they shatter everything. Casey had always been the golden one. The family's favorite. My parents used to say she had her head on straight, while I was too emotional, too reactive, too much. But I knew better now. She wasn't golden. She was poison in pearls. And after the conference fallout, she wasn't silent for long. The first sign came 2 days later, an Instagram post. A picture of her with my daughter, from months ago. Captioned, "Some of us know what real family means." 2 hearts # big sis moments. I stayed at the screen, my jaw tightening. Real family. Casey hadn't visited Ava in weeks. She'd laughed when Dad slapped me, then vanished when things got hard. Now she wanted credit? It wasn't just an insult. It was strategy. Casey was laying the groundwork, painting herself as the loving aunt, the misunderstood sister, the savior. She wanted control back. She wanted sympathy. And in our small town, perception was everything. So I called a friend, Matteo, a journalist I'd known since college. He owed me a favor. "I want to tell my story," I said. "On record. No fluff. Just truth." He hesitated. "You sure you're ready for that kind of exposure?" I was. We met that weekend in a quiet coffee shop. I handed him everything: screenshots, medical reports, old texts, the charity embezzlement papers tied to Casey's name. He sifted through them silently, his eyes widening. "She's been laundering donations from her own nonprofit," he whispered. "Through fake invoices. I tracked them." Matteo leaned back. "This could ruin her." I nodded. "That's the point." The story ran a week later. The Golden Daughter's tarnished halo, one family's quiet collapse. It wasn't just about the slap. It was about everything. The manipulation, the betrayal, the truth behind the shiny photos and curated lies. Casey went nuclear. She called me screaming, her voice cracking like cheap glass. "You're jealous. You always have been." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm done. That's what this is." My parents tried damage control. Dad left voicemails laced with regret. Mom sent cryptic texts. "You've made your point. Enough now." But I hadn't made my point. Not yet. Because there was one final thread. The house. The same one they kicked me out of. The one Casey claimed as hers. But guess what? I still co-owned it. A technicality they overlooked while forging their little alliance. I'd been paying taxes on it for years. Quietly. Automatically. So I filed the motion. And 3 weeks later, a court officer taped a notice of sale to the front door of their precious home. I didn't need the money. I needed the message. You can't build an empire on someone else's silence. The auction happened quietly. I never stepped foot there again. But I heard the story from a neighbor, how my mom cried on the lawn, how Casey screamed at the agent, how Dad refused to speak. I watched from a distance, not physically, but emotionally. Detached. Clear. Ava and I were living in a small rental by the lake now. We painted the kitchen yellow. She named our plants after Disney characters. Life was slower, quieter, and free. One night, as I tucked her in, she asked, "Mommy, why don't we see Grandma anymore?" I paused. "Because some people don't know how to be kind. And we choose kindness now." She nodded, like she understood more than she should. And maybe she did. Because kids remember who clapped when you cried, who turned away, who watched your pain like a show. And Ava, she remembered. But more importantly, she was healing. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "They tried to break me in front of you." She smiled, already half asleep. But I didn't let them win. What they broke was their illusion. What I rebuilt was our freedom. The silence after the storm was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. No more surprise knocks on the door. No more texts demanding apologies. No more guilt-tripping voicemails that ended with, "We're still your parents." They weren't. Not anymore. They were strangers with shared DNA. But just when I thought they'd finally faded into the background, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address. No signature. Just my name, scribbled like an afterthought. I opened it slowly, my heart pounding. Inside was a photo, a picture of Ava in her kindergarten classroom, from weeks ago, taken without permission, and a single sentence typed below it. "She deserves to know the truth." I froze. It wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. Casey had always been calculated. This wasn't a reunion attempt. It was leverage. They were trying to pull Ava back into their world, through fear. I called the school immediately, set up extra security, spoke to the principal. They took it seriously, thank God. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the war wasn't over. So I stopped playing defense, and I took the final step. I met with my lawyer. "Are you ready to do this?" she asked, placing the file in front of me. Inside, decades of receipts, bank statements, legal rights to assets they thought were buried, voice recordings from the night of the dinner, and even the nonprofit fraud trail would trace back to Casey and my dad. "Yes," I said. "Let's finish it." We filed a formal family protection order and a lawsuit for financial abuse and defamation. And this time, I did it under my full legal name. No initials. No hiding. They tried to silence me for years. I wanted my truth on record now, legally, permanently. The trial date was set, and word spread fast. The courtroom was filled with more whispers than people. My parents looked small on that wooden bench. Casey didn't even show. I stood before the judge and told everything. The slap, the blood, the cover-ups, the gaslighting, the photo in the mail, the inheritance manipulation. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just laid it bare. And when I was done, the judge said, "Thank you. That was the most honest testimony I've heard in years." They tried to discredit me, of course. Claimed I was bitter, that I was twisting stories, that I just wanted revenge. But the evidence was undeniable. My lawyer played the voicemail of Dad saying, "She deserved it." The bank records showed Casey draining Ava's college fund through fake transfers. By the end of the hearing, the defense attorney looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Verdict? The court froze all shared family accounts, ordered Casey to repay Ava's fund in full, plus damages, restraining order granted, property rights in my name affirmed. My parents barred from contacting me or Ava indefinitely. And still, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. That night, Ava and I had pizza on the floor of our tiny living room. We laughed. She tried pineapple on pizza for the first time and made a face like she'd eaten soap. Then she said, "Mommy, are you happy now?" I looked at her, really looked. The soft curls around her cheeks, the brightness in her eyes, the peace that lived in her now. "I think," I whispered, "this is the happiest I've ever been." She climbed into my lap and hugged me tight. That hug, that tiny, innocent moment, was the real victory. Not the lawsuit, not the headlines, not the silence from people who used to call me family. It was Ava, whole, safe, and still capable of love after everything. They tried to erase me. They tried to shame me. But I walked into fire and came out with my daughter's hand in mine. That is what they never saw coming. And now, all that remained was one final closure. The story wasn't done yet. But justice, it had already begun knocking. They say revenge is best served cold. I say it's best served publicly. 1 week after the verdict, I got a call from the local news. Apparently, the courthouse leak had reached the press. The story of a daughter fighting back against her abusive family had struck a chord, not because it was rare, but because it was too common and no one ever talked about it. They asked if I wanted to go on camera. I said yes. Not for me, but for every woman watching who'd been slapped into silence and told to smile through the blood. The interview aired on a Sunday night. By Monday, Casey had lost her job. The non-profit board she worked for couldn't survive the bad press. Donations dried up. Sponsors pulled out. Her face, smug and polished, was now being blasted with words like fraud, exploitation, and abuse of trust. Dad didn't take long to follow. His real estate firm quietly removed his profile from their website. Resigned was the official statement. But I knew the truth. The firm couldn't afford the baggage of a man who told his bleeding daughter she deserved it. Mom. She disappeared from social circles. The same women she once held tea parties with now crossed the street when they saw her. Their kids didn't want to play with Ava anymore. Not because of Ava, but because their mom said, "We don't want any drama." Turns out, drama dies when the truth is loud. And mine had roared. Then something happened I never expected. A letter arrived, this time handwritten. It was from my dad. It didn't start with "I'm sorry." It started with, "I don't know what we were trying to protect." He wrote about fear, shame, how the image of perfection had become more important than love, how they'd chosen silence over healing, how they thought keeping Casey on a pedestal meant the family looked intact, even if it meant stomping on me to do it. He ended with, "If you never speak to us again, I understand." I didn't cry. I didn't forgive. But I acknowledged the growth, even if it came too late. Ava asked one day, "Do you think they'll ever come back?" I kneeled, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Some people never come back. And that's okay." Because we weren't waiting anymore. We were moving forward. Fast forward 3 months. Ava's college fund was not only restored but doubled, thanks to damages. I opened a savings account in her name. She didn't know it yet, but I added a note inside for her 18th birthday. Never let anyone shame you into silence. Your voice is power. As for me, I finally bought that little bookstore I'd always dreamed of owning. Brick walls, vintage lamps, a bell over the door that chimed like an old movie. I named it Unwritten Chapters. People came in looking for stories. They had no idea mine was on every shelf, in strength, in healing, in the quiet power of choosing peace over bitterness. One afternoon, Ava asked if we could hang one of her drawings in the window. She handed me a sketch of 2 hands holding, one big, one small. Above it, she'd written, "We don't break, we build." That's when I knew. The cycle was broken. And even if my past had been stained by betrayal, my future was etched in resilience. They tried to reduce me to silence, shame, obedience. Instead, I became a story, the kind that warns, the kind that inspires, the kind that ends with power in the hands of the one they thought was weak. And now, whenever someone asks me how it ended, I smile and say only one word: